Let me introduce Martin, sitting next to me, shortly. He is a professor at ETH Zurich. He is also based at Swiss Economics Institute. His PhD is from University of Innsbruck, where he is from, or at least from Austria, yes. Right? He has about 30 years of experience doing research on innovation and innovation policy. He published a voluminous number of papers in top field journals, such as Research Policy, Industrial Corporate Change, Journal Technology Transfer, and you name it. And we are very happy to have you. We are privileged. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for the very kind invitation and the very kind words. Thanks a lot for the invitation from the Swiss Embassy. And thanks a lot also to CERGE-EI and to Martin Srollec for this invitation, and also for the nice conversation we had already before this event today. So what I will talk about today is the Swiss innovation promotion system and what we can learn from it. I would like to start with a brief overview about where Switzerland stands in the international innovation rankings. And then I would like to point out the strengths and the challenges of the Swiss innovation landscape. And then, of course, I want to dig deeper into how the innovation promotion system works in Switzerland, then how effective it is. And in the end, I would like to discuss, or maybe it is the introduction to the discussion, whether this model can serve as a model, as an innovation promotion model, also for other countries. So let's start with the performance, and let us look at the so-called European Innovation Scoreboard. This is let's say, a scoreboard that allows us to compare the innovation performance of European countries and also in other international countries like the United States or South Korea or Japan. When we focus on Europe, then we see that according to this scoreboard, according to this indicator, Switzerland is doing quite well since many, many years. It is among the innovation leaders in Europe. If we look at the countries that are nowadays following Switzerland, then we see Denmark at the second position, Sweden and Finland in the third and the fourth position. But what is more interesting here is to see that when we start in 2017, then we see that the differences between those countries have been quite extensive, right? But if you look today, then we see in 2024 that the differences have been decreasing, meaning that other countries are catching up to Switzerland. Another thing is that when we talk about innovation promotion, one might ask, why do we need to support companies to be innovative, right? And the economic literature is very instructive on this, because we all know that innovation activities are subject to market failure. So the free market cannot solve this issue. And if the free market cannot do it, then of course the government has to step in, right? And this is what is done in almost all countries. The curious thing is, however, is then if we look at another statistics, this is again from the European Innovation Scoreboard, and we look at how important or how much a company or how much a government is helping companies to be innovative. Here the indicator for direct and indirect government support for business R&D, we see that Switzerland is ranked very, very low, well below the EU average. And of course, like mentioned before, innovation is subject to market failure. So actually, if you talk about an innovation leader, you might expect that the government is doing a lot in order to promote innovation. This seems to be not the case in Switzerland. However, when we look at how much companies are investing in R&D, then we see exactly the opposite. We see that Switzerland is leading the ranking, right? So what is going on here? We are very innovative, but there is low support and there is low public support, but high private investments in R&D. So One secret or one ingredient for this success is good framework condition. Good framework conditions should encourage companies to invest in R&D. What do I mean by good framework condition? So again, I would like to point at the statistics, right? Representative for the respective countries. And if we look at one important framework condition is the quality of the employees, of the staff, the human resources. And if you look at this indicator, which is usually measured by the number of doctoral students in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, then the fraction of the population that is engaged into lifelong learning, or also the share of people with a tertiary degree, then Switzerland is doing quite well in this indicator. So it's not surprising that it is also leading the Human Resource Quality Index from the European Innovation Scoreboard. Another important framework condition is the attractiveness of the research system. It's very important to publish, is one thing, but it's also very important that the publication contributes to the scientific literature in general, measured by the number of citations, for instance. And here Switzerland is also doing quite well, and it is also doing quite well in attracting international students, international researchers, international PhDs. So the third point is that the population in Switzerland, but also in other countries even more, is very skilled in digital technologies. This helps, of course, a company when they, for instance, want to introduce new process innovations which have a digital component. Then the digitalization level of the population and the staff is very important. And last but not least, R&D expenditures in the public sectors are indeed important. And this has two components. These are R&D expenditures made by the higher education institutions. And then this indicator also refers to R&D expenditures referring to government R&D. And in the Swiss case, the let's say, government R&D is not that high, but the R&D expenditures of the higher research institution is comparatively high. So also in this ranking, we see is led by Denmark, followed by Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Finland, and so on. These are only a few examples. Other framework conditions that are very important is, more general ones, is political stability, a sound macroeconomic environment, and also in Switzerland, specific important is the competition on taxes. So in Switzerland, the regions are competing on the tax level. Of course, they want to have a lower tax level in order to be attractive for technology-intensive or innovative companies so that they build their business in this region. And this overall is also responsible that the tax level in Switzerland is low, right? Okay, these are a few examples. Now look at the other side of the coin. So where are the challenges for the Swiss innovation performance? They're numerous. First, when we start a more general level, we saw already in the first slide that the technological leadership or innovation leadership of Switzerland is challenged. It's challenged because other countries, of course, are catching up, which is quite good, because this increases the competition also for Switzerland to improve on the innovation performance. But the second point, maybe more important, is that there are changes in geopolitics, world trade, and international investments. This is a big challenge for the Swiss business location and innovation location. And we all know the news, right? And we see that China, the European Union, and also the United States, they're launching big projects in order to increase their attractiveness for international companies and also to become more and more independent from international supply chains. So what, for instance, the US is doing is they launched the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, and a few months ago or weeks ago, the Trump administration launched the Stargate project, where they want to invest $500 billion in AI research. Of course, private. This is a private-public partnership. Not everything is public. Then in the European Union, we have the European CHIPS Act and the AI, also Artificial Intelligence Champions Initiative. And then also we know in China, they're very strategic in their industrial policy, and they also want to further or to increase their competitiveness in terms of AI and other digital technologies. And then, particular for Switzerland important is the OECD minimum tax requirement. 15% sounds not high for many other countries, but it is relatively high for Swiss measures. Right? In Switzerland, many regions have taxed the companies with considerably less than 15%. And for those regions, the minimum tax would mean that to some extent they might lose attractiveness for business locations. So there is what they are thinking about it, what we can do, when we raise our taxes to remain attractive for national companies, but also for international companies. And now in the next step, I would like to go one step further into the innovation process of the companies. So where are the challenges in Switzerland there? And the figures I will present in what follows are based on a representative survey or representative surveys, because we go back in time, for Swiss companies with more than 5 employees. And these are also the official statistic, the official data for the Swiss innovation performance. So what we see here is that the most important obstacles for innovation activities in Switzerland are high innovation costs. About 13% of all companies with more than 5 employees say this is indeed very important obstacle, meaning they scored this obstacle with the scale on a, on a 4-digit scale, they scored it 4, means the highest possible obstacle we can have. So that's a very important one. Then the lack of specialized staff is similar important. Building regulation and zoning is very important too, but we have to keep in mind it's about innovation obstacles. So building and regulation and zoning has become a very important obstacle for innovation activities. I will come to this later, back to this later. Then lack of internal funds, long amortization periods are also very important ones. And now if we look at towards the end of this ranking, then we see lack of external funds, right? So money from the government, from banks, from other financiers ranks relatively low. Only 6% of the companies say, well, that's an important innovation obstacle for us. Okay, now if we take the 3 most important obstacles, which are lack of specialized staff, regulation, and high innovation costs, and we look back in time how these obstacles developed. And then what we see is that high innovation costs have been important and are important since more than 10 years. If we look at the second most important one, lack of internal funds, then we see that this obstacle has been a little bit decreasing in the course of the time. Lack of specialized staff, however, has been increasing dramatically. We have 6% of the companies in 2012, in the period 2012 to 2014, that said that is an important obstacle. And now we do have more than 12% of the companies, so they doubled. If we look at the lack of IT personnel, we also see an increase, but this is maybe a phenomenon we also observe in other countries. And now the most surprising one is building regulation and zoning. So it has become increasingly difficult for a Swiss company to build a new laboratory, to build a new plant in which they want maybe also to be innovative, to produce a new product, to build it. It takes too long, and it's too complicated to get the permissions for that. So this is a direct call to the policymakers in Switzerland that basically this is something we have to fix. Then if we look at other challenges, one important challenge is the digitalization of the innovation activities. And we have to be aware that innovation is not taking place isolated from other companies, from universities, or from other institutions. Nowadays, innovation activity is a collaboration exercise. And it is also important to draw on knowledge generated by other companies, by universities, by suppliers, by customers. So this knowledge should be integrated into the innovation process of a company. And when we look at what are the most important knowledge sources for innovation activities, then we see that customers are the most important one since 2014. And even if we would go further back in time, we see that customers is a very important knowledge source for innovation activities, which is to some extent obvious. However, maybe less obvious is that suppliers of material are the second most important knowledge source for innovation activities. And the third one, and that's rather surprising, are nowadays software suppliers. And the importance of software suppliers has increased significantly, meaning that software and software suppliers are increasingly important for the innovation activities of a Swiss company. And if we take this into context, what is happening now in terms of international relations, then it is a potential threat for the Swiss companies if the supply chains, the software supply chains from other countries, let's say from the United States or from Asia, are interrupted for whatever reason, because software is important for Switzerland in order to keep the innovation performance. Then another important challenge refers to the concentration of R&D activities. So the good news is that the sales share of R&D expenditures has been increasing steadily since the turn of the century. Now, in the last survey, about 2.5% of the sales have been spent on R&D activities, increasing trend. The potentially not so good news is that fewer and fewer companies are doing R&D in Switzerland, which implies that R&D is getting more and more concentrated. So fewer firms are doing R&D, but those companies that are pursuing R&D activities have to invest more in order to come up with let's say, rather radical innovative products. And this concentration of R&D activities might not so much affect, let's say, the productivity development of the country, but in the short run. But in the longer run, there is a risk that this might reduce the absorptive capacity of the companies towards knowledge that is generated at the university, at other research institutions, or even at other companies. What do I mean with absorptive capacity? Absorptive capacity implies the understanding of a company, what is going on in terms of research, in terms of new development in other countries or in other companies or at the universities. And if this absorptive capacity is reduced, then of course it's getting more and more complicated to transfer the knowledge from the universities into the company and to transform it into new products and services. So that's a challenge. And another challenge refers to the fact that also the number of product innovators has been decreasing in the course of the time. However, since the period 2014-16, we do see a slightly increase in this indicator. And if I again show here the fraction of companies that are doing R&D, here also we see the potentially negative trend, not the potentially, the negative trend. And then we put these two indicators together, then we learn that the fraction of product innovators, as the fraction of companies that are able to produce a new product without using R&D has increased, right? And this might compromise the innovation depth, means the radicalness of a new product. And the more radical a new product is, the more new, so to say, a new product is, of course, the higher is the competitive advantage for the company. Let us spend one or two slides more on this. So the challenge is the lower innovation depth. And what I show you here is that the sales share from innovative products that are new to the firm, this means are incremental innovations, they are quite stable. So in Switzerland, companies with more than 5 employees earn about 30% of their turnover with incremental innovation. 30% of the turnover, that's quite a lot, right? However, if we look at the more radical innovations, so these are innovations that are new to the market, something really new, then we see that the sales share of this radical innovation have been decreasing in the course of the time significantly, from about 5–6% to now between about 3%, right? And this, of course, shows that it has become more difficult to develop products with great market potential, so high innovation depth. And however, this is necessary in the longer term in order to remain competitive at the high level. Then another challenge refers to the international innovation competition, in particular for the high-tech sector. The high-tech sector is a very important sector for Switzerland. It comprises sectors or industries with a relatively high level of R&D expenditures. And for instance, part of the high-tech sector are the chemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, it is the machinery, electrotechnic, electronics, the car industry are part of the high-tech sector. And here, of course, we see that the sales share of R&D expenditures is relatively high, 4% or even higher. But again, here we see that the sales share of radical innovations that are new to the market, innovations new to the market, have been decreasing here too. And it is not that they decrease their effort to do so. No, the effort is the same and even increased. But it has been getting more and more difficult, to have a certain margin with these new products. Also indicating simply that international competition, international innovation competition has increased. So these are, to our understanding, one of the most important challenges for the Swiss innovation activities. And the question is now how to approach those challenges. And here I come now to the Swiss innovation system and how it works. First, I want to spend one slide on the market failure issue when we talk about innovation, because always from a policy perspective we have to ask ourselves, is it really necessary to intervene? Is it really necessary that we launch costly programs in order to support companies in their innovation activities? According to the mainstream literature in innovation economics, yes it is, right? So there has to be done something. And I will now emphasize 3 points why there is a rationale for public R&D support or support for R&D activities. First, the social returns of R&D activities and innovation activities are higher than the private returns. What does this mean? This means that if a company is engaging in R&D activities, right, developing new products, then there are spillovers or positive externalities to other companies, meaning that other companies can benefit from the accumulated knowledge of the focal firm in order to further their own innovation activities without paying for it, right? So there are positive externalities. And these positive externalities are let's say, desirable from a societal point of view, but not so much desirable from the company point of view, right? Because this means also more competition. And this means also that they invest in something which they cannot fully appropriate, right? So this is one rationale for public support. The second one is that R&D projects are risky and their outcomes are uncertain. Yes. This means assuming that the companies are risk averse, which is the rule, let's say, they will not engage in such risky projects, and they will say, no, I don't do it because I can lose money. I have other, let's say, possibilities to pursue my business plans. But from a societal point of view, it is important that companies are conducting this type of risky projects. Why? Because we face problems in health, in, let's say, climate change, in other environmental issues, right? And so we expect the private, the business, the businesses, that they come up with solutions to these problems. And this also involves to conduct risky projects. And so the society wants that the companies are engaging in such projects, and therefore they need to be supported, because otherwise they won't do it. And the third point refers to imperfect financial markets. And this is related to the fact that for an investor, it's very difficult to assess, the riskiness and, let's say, the market potential of an R&D project. And this is related very much to the so-called principal agent problem in economic theory. And if this is the case, then the investor will hesitate to lend money for such projects. And these are three rationales why innovation support makes sense. Okay, now how does innovation support in Switzerland look like? I cannot emphasize more this first information here. It is that for the Swiss innovation support system, let's say, good framework conditions are essential. And good framework conditions, again, refer to high-quality universities, good infrastructure, technical infrastructure, let's say, competitive markets, a technological engineering focus based on vocational education. This is also a very important part for the innovation system in Switzerland, not only the tertiary education system, also the vocational one. And then, of course, political stability, I mentioned already, competitive tax system and macroeconomic stability are also important framework conditions. And against the background of these framework conditions, Switzerland is pursuing a bottom-up approach, meaning that universities and or companies, they are designing the research projects, the innovation projects they want to pursue, right? And so that means it is problem-driven. It is problem-driven. What the problems the company face, they formulate the project, and then they look for support to carry out this project. And they can then choose among three levels, or take all three levels. There is the federal level, so there is support on the federal level, there is support on the cantonal level, and there is support also on the international level, right? On the federal level, we have the Swiss National Science Foundation, which is basic research. So this is not so interesting from the firms, but it's here in order to show the completeness of it. Then we have the InnoSwiss. The InnoSwiss is the most important innovation promotion agency in Switzerland. And InnoSwiss predominantly supports innovation mainly through knowledge and technology transfer between private firms and public universities. InnoSwiss also has other instruments to promote innovation activities, which are networking support, coaching support, project setup support, as well as direct support of startups. So to InnoSwiss, I will come in a minute. But there are also other options on the cantonal level. We have, since 2020, R&D tax credits. So a company can deduce the taxable basis up to 150% of the R&D expenditures, not 100%, 150%. Most of the cantons, most of the regions offer this possibility, but not all of them. And then we also have, since 2020, the patent box. The patent box is currently used by about 1.7% of Swiss companies, and the R&D tax credit is used by about 12 to 13% of the Swiss innovative companies with more than 5 employees. So the 1.7% could appear to be low. However, we have to take into account that only 2.7% of the Swiss companies are patenting. And then on the international level, of course, they can apply for the EU framework programs as well. Now, coming back to the InnoSwiss model. Again, InnoSwiss is supporting, let's say, cooperative projects between the university and the private firms. So, and the basic idea is that the company is designing a project, and then the company looks for a partner at the university, might be supported by InnoSwiss to find a partner. And then once the company has a partner, they can, let's say, submit the proposal to InnoSwiss for funding, right? And in case it is accepted, the proposal is accepted, then what happens? Only the university part receives funding. There is no 1 Swiss franc that goes directly from the InnoSwiss to the private company. And the private company has to cover at least 50% of the project costs. So what a company can gain from it, right? It basically gains access to knowledge at the university, access to the infrastructure at the university, and access to the technology developed at the universities. So it is an extension of the knowledge capacities of the firm. And the annual budget of InnoSwiss is between 140 and 170 million Swiss francs, and the average contribution of InnoSwiss amounts to a research project amounts to 360,000 Swiss francs. But again, this is the contribution of InnoSwiss, and the contribution of InnoSwiss will never be more than 50%. Right? Because at least 50% of the project costs has to be covered by the company. That means that the average size of an InnoSwiss project, if you take both parts together, amounts to about 720,000 Swiss francs. Then the funding policy, how InnoSwiss is picking the projects. Basically, they aim for high-risk, high-value projects, meaning that these are projects that would be not pursued without the InnoSwiss support. So that's the idea. We really want to have the so-called behavioral additionality. And then the clients of InnoSwiss are small and medium-sized firms, but also startups and spin-offs. About 30% of them are startups and spin-offs. And there are also some larger companies, but the most important target group are SMEs, small and medium-sized companies. Okay, the mechanism, I described it already, but here, just to summarize it, it is an alternating transfer of knowledge and technology. So the firm is providing ideas for innovation, have to find a partner at the university. Then R&D takes place at both universities and firms. It is an extension of the capacity of the firm, and the firm uses the generated knowledge to create innovations. And in the end, we want to see value creation, means firms can increase their employment or their sales, for instance. Okay, then the question now is, how effective is this program, is this process, right? So does it really create more employment, more sales for the companies that are funded? And here we did a rather comprehensive evaluation of this, of the main funding instrument, which is the project promotion, the way I described it now, from InnoSwiss. So what we did is that we collected data about the InnoSwiss clientele. These are companies that are applying for InnoSwiss support in 2019, 2021, and 2023. And then we combined this information with data from the Swiss Innovation and Digitalization Survey, the Swiss Dedicated Digitalization Survey, and the Swiss Knowledge and Technology Transfer Survey. So in the end, we had a very comprehensive firm-level data set ranging from 2010 to 2022, 3,220 unique firm year observations, 383 are funded, and 533 are, I will explain this in a second, the control group. So we use then, econometrically speaking, a so-called diff in diff method, so difference in different estimation methods, and here are the results. What is very important for this method is that there is a parallel trend before treatment, before a company gets funded. And what we see here is that if we compare the funded companies, they will be funded here. You know, here they are not funded, but if we take these companies, in the future funded ones, and compare it with the control companies that are equal to the funded ones, with the difference that they are not funded, right? Also not in the future funded. And here we see there is no significant difference. So the confidence interval, so to say, statistically speaking, is not different from zero, right? And here then treatment takes place. And what we see now, that the companies that received funding increased their employment significantly more compared to the control firms which have not been funded. And the amount is quite considerable. We see that already the first year after funding, you know, in the first year after funding, we see an increase of employment by 7.8% compared to the control group. These are the companies not being funded. Then in 3 years after, in T+2, it is 17.2%, and 5 years after, it is 27.9%. So on average, we see that InnoSwiss funding increased employment by 17.6% more for the funded companies compared to the control group. That's quite an impact. If we look at the sales, then we also see a quite positive effect. We see, again, there is no difference in the pre-treatment analysis, but if we look at the sales now, then we see that in the period T, immediately after the funding, we do not see a significant difference between funded and not funded companies. And that's to some extent understandable, because if you design a new product and you launch it to the market, it takes a little time until revenues are created, right? Significant revenues are created and this product penetrates the market. And however, if we look in after 3 years or after 5 years, we see also here that InnoSwiss support increased the sales of the funded companies significantly. On average, the sales after 5 years, sales are 20.7% higher for funded companies compared to the not funded ones. Okay, then we looked at if different firm sizes are affected differently. And indeed, we see that the effect is in particular large for very small firms, means companies with between 5 and 50 employees, and also for larger firms. We see no significant effect for companies between 50 and 250 employees. They are positive, you know, but they are not significantly different from zero. Then if you look at if it matters with which type of university a company is collaborating, then we see, again, yes, there are some differences. We see that if companies collaborating with the ETH domain and are funded by InnoSwiss, then we see a significant positive effect. The ETH domain, this covers the ETH in Zurich and the EPFL in Lausanne, as well as a number of 4 research institutions that are connected to the ETH in Zurich. And if companies collaborating with the ETH domain, we see a positive effect. And also if companies are collaborating with universities of applied sciences, again, the effect is significant and positive. So to summarize this exercise, this evaluation of the InnoSwiss project funding, we see that it has a positive effect on both firm sales and employment. And we also see that a joint innovation project funded by InnoSwiss increases firm sales by about 21% and employment by about 18% on average over the next 5 years. Then there is heterogeneity, again, like I mentioned it already, that the effects are particularly strong for small firms, innovation projects with the ETH domain and the universities of applied science. And even if we look at different disciplines, we see that the effect is particularly strong in the field of engineering sciences. Well, the last point is, can it serve as a model for other countries? That's a very tough question. However, we tried to, let's say, carve out some, let's say, conditions that seem to be important. First, good universities. I think it's important to have good universities that are attracting international students, PhDs, researchers. Then there should be incentives not only for publication and education, there should also be incentives for transferring the knowledge or collaborating with the industry in transferring the knowledge. Then a good technical infrastructure is important, in particular for very small companies that need a lab, that need some technical infrastructure in order to start their business, or in the beginning to scale up their business, and there the university can play an important role. And then what is also increasingly becoming important are an efficient regulation of intellectual property rights. What happens with the knowledge that is generated at the university if the researchers want to become or found a spin-off and want to pursue this idea which they developed at the university in the private environment. Then high investments in basic research. There is often, one hears the concern that, well, we're a small country. If you invest too much in universities, there are spillovers, meaning others are benefiting more than the companies in their own country. That's not true. We know that there is a rationale that for small countries to benefit from investments in basic research because the effects are local, predominantly local. Then also important is that high investments in basic research provide knowledge, graduates, and technology for the business sector, which in turn strengthens the absorptive capacity of the business sector, which makes it easier for the companies to absorb the knowledge at the university, to understand what is going on at the university, and to make use of this knowledge in order to develop their new products and services. High absorptive capacity usually is found when the share of manufacturing sector, in particular the research-intensive sector, is relatively high. Then the sector is investing considerably in R&D, and if there is a skilled workforce. And then, in particular, for smaller countries, it is important to have access to international markets. First, to leverage the investment in basic and applied research, right? Because you want to sell the new product not only domestically, you want to sell it internationally, to leverage the knowledge, to increase the profit potential. And then, of course, you want to have access to international markets because the knowledge from the sales market is very important to design the new product in a way that you can easily sell it in those markets, right? And access to those markets also allows for a knowledge transfer from those markets to the focal company in Switzerland or in the home country of the company. Okay, and then of course, when these framework conditions are fulfilled, one has to ask how much a country should invest in basic research in order to trigger the transfer and to provide positive effects for the economy. And that's a very tough question. However, a colleague of mine, Hans Gersbach, and co-authors, they tried to find a response to this question, and they came up with the following determinants. They say, in order to decide how important basic research is, how much one should invest in basic research, the stage of the economic development of a country is very important. The share of R&D intensive industries on total GDP is very important. The openness of the economy is very important, and also the share of domestic firms owned by foreign companies is important. As a general rule, a country should invest more in basic research. The closer the companies are to the technological frontier, the bigger the manufacturing sector and the more open it is. And with this, I would like to summarize. Switzerland is an innovation leader, is among the most innovative countries in Europe, but also worldwide. However, it has low direct and indirect government support for business R&D. However, it shows high and constantly increasing business R&D expenditures, So the question is what Switzerland is doing different. At the same time, Switzerland is facing significant challenges. First, high innovation costs, lack of specialized staff, Regulation is becoming an issue. Dependency on international software providers, concentration of R&D activities, keeping innovation depth high is a challenge, and increased international competition, in particular for the high-tech sector, is also a challenge. What Switzerland does in order to address those challenges, it follows a bottom-up approach. The Swiss government is not telling the companies what they should do. It is more or less the Swiss innovation promotion system is based on the ideas, on the problem solution ideas of the companies, and the government is then ready, to some extent, to support those activities. Of course, this works against the background of an attractive framework condition for innovation and R&D, good universities, good infrastructure, high-skilled employees, attractive tax system, access to international markets are important factors to that. And the third one is also very important, is that from time to time, a rigorous scientific evaluation of the main funding instrument and also a comprehensive quantitative monitoring of the support mechanism is essential. Because the environment is changing, the technology is changing, the requirements of the companies are changing, and so the evaluation system has to be from time to time evaluated. And then, of course, under certain conditions, the Swiss Innovation Promotion Program can serve as a model for other countries and a complement, or even, if the time is right, to replace existing support instruments. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And yes, I'm happy to discuss some issues. Thank you.
Okay, before we open general discussion, let me offer you some remarks on what we have heard from the point of view of the Czech Republic. For this purpose, I will summarize first 3 studies of mine and my colleague Matěj Bajgar. First on the list is, I would say, the most rigorous scientific evaluation of this kind of program that you can do, leveraging so-called regression discontinuity, which essentially means comparing projects that applied for funding that ended up ranked just above the cutoff of funding and just below the cutoff funding. That are most likely to be very similar to each other, except of the funding. Okay, in very short, the method. In this study that is coming out in a Journal of Public Economics, we find out that subsidies from the Alpha program of Thatcher stimulated R&D expenditures in firms that would not happen without the subsidy in small and medium-sized enterprises, both during the subsidy and also after the subsidy expired, meaning that there was some long-term effect even after the public funding was gone. Still, the companies invested more than it would be without the subsidy. Second, this doesn't appear in large firms. So in small, medium firms, the subsidies seem to work. For large firms, we don't see any difference. Second study is based on large-scale analysis in which Matěj was also involved at the EODC level, where they looked at R&D tax credits. So it's called indirect support for innovation in firms. What came out at both the OECD level for all countries involved and the Czech Republic was again that R&D tax credits have effect on stimulating R&D in small firms and medium-sized firms, but not really in large firms. It also shows for firms that are, in terms of size of their R&D budget, below the median and above the median. So those with small budgets, the effect was much larger than firms with larger budgets.
Of course, this is correlated. Small firm and small budget often appears in the same firm. And the third study, very shortly, doesn't attempt to estimate effect of anything, but simply looks on where the subsidies went in the Czech Republic between 2010 and 2020. And what you see that those subsidies are most frequently used by large firms, older firms, and manufacturing firms in the Czech Republic. Okay? Which is kind of the opposite of what the previous studies show, that where it's most effective. Academics often are asked by policymakers to give a very short, direct, clear message. And academics very often are not able. They come out with very complex explanations, very long summaries, they're not able to really answer the questions. Here we are kind of approaching a relatively unique situation where we have a relatively clear answer. Okay? Not only based on these two studies, but there is a general consensus in the literature, not only in Czech Republic but other countries, that these subsidy schemes really work well for small and medium-sized enterprises, but not so well in large firms. There are good theoretical reasons, because the small firms have difficulty to find financing for R&D projects, and so on and so forth. The reasons that we heard for justifying support are far stronger for small and medium-sized firms, where the market failures are most acute, than in large firms. So in theory, this should happen. Empirical evidence shows that it's actually happening. So if you're a policymaker, there's a clear message. It's not just me and Maciej who are saying that. If you read the last OECD economic survey of Czech Republic that just came out a couple of weeks ago, if you just read the abstract that had only 150 words, you see OECD being compelled to give this clear message about relatively niche topic into the abstract of this survey. Okay? Better target business support for R&D to young and small firms. They are so desperate to get this across that it even appears in the abstract. Okay? So let's not kid ourselves if we don't know what to do. Okay? We know what to do. We need to support and target small and medium-sized firms, or firms who do relatively little R&D compared to other firms. Now, we know what to do, but even if we didn't want to change anything, there is a big change looming on the horizon relatively soon, because in a few years, the EU funding for these kind of programs will expire. The operational programs will expire around 2008. There will be some period when the funding will slowly expire, but in 5 years from now, there will be no EU structural funds. And these funds funded a big chunk of subsidies that went for R&D and innovation in the Czech Republic in the last 10, 15 years. Probably more than half. Some people in the US will know better, but it's definitely, I think, for more than half. Okay? So big part of this funding will simply disappear. Okay? And second, and even more important, is that these EU programs funded different kind of innovative firms than the national funded programs, which was good because we didn't want them to compete and giving the same kind of money, to the same programs. But these EU programs, if you look at the data, were more inclined to fund companies with small R&D budgets, that did R&D only conventionally, or that innovated without R&D, and also by correlation also to smaller and younger firms. So exactly this part of the funding in the Czech Republic that was supposedly most effective given our results is going to disappear in a few years. And we will be left with a question whether we will simply let the national funding continue the same way and flowing into those older, larger, and more industry-oriented firms, and let the system be tilted even more into the direction, or we will do something else. So this is a window of opportunity for actually sitting down and have a debate of what do you do at this crunch point. Here I offer some ideas, very authoritative, my own take of maybe what we could consider doing with our innovation policy mix. The number one is we need to better align the direct and indirect support. That means R&D grants, subsidies, and R&D tax credits. Right now, it's offered to the same kind of firms. Often there is a marginal difference for many firms whether they draw on this or that. Okay? And these schemes compete with each other. So my proposal would be to steer the direct support programs more to smaller, younger firms, or firms doing R&D occasionally, not on a regular basis, or not yet doing R&D, or to stimulate their shift from doing it R&D occasionally, or not doing it, to doing it continuously on a regular basis. And at the same time, the indirect support should be left for those firms that do R&D regularly, typically larger firms. Now let us split. The larger, let them deduct it from taxes and steer these direct support programs to the small, medium-sized companies. This will also help the programs because they would free up their hands. Okay, they can better focus serving those clients, small, medium-sized, if we leave out the larger clients from the picture. Second, we need to make sure that the small, younger firms doing R&D occasionally or not are not disadvantaged when they apply for R&D subsidies. If you look at the evaluation schemes of many of these programs, you see that history of the firm matters. Okay, how much R&D did you do in recent years? What was your profit? How stable is your financing? Okay, if you are a technological startup, you have no history. Okay, so you are in disadvantage right there when you apply and when you get evaluation points in your project. So these kind of aspects, that's very simple, right? It's a banal, but simply, should not be part of the evaluation process. Then we should look at more options of other instruments. For example, equity funding. So the government doesn't give a subsidy, but it gets a stake in the company. Ownership, seed fund. There was a long attempt and discussion how to establish seed fund in the Czech Republic. It never happened so far as I know. Or financial policy instruments. That means guaranteeing for loans or subsidizing interest rates on innovative funding from the banks. Here, big clarification will be that the devil will be really in detail, and we need to make sure that the subsidies will not end up in the banking sector, one way or another. So the banks will not manage to get, way in getting a big chunk of this money through fees or service fees or taxing bigger interest rates on these amounts. I would say equity is given what we know how the pension system, the private, is organized, would be probably a safer way. Or something maybe more radical than that in the space direction. We heard that in the Swiss model, the firms actually don't get any public subsidies, right? It's important to emphasize that, right? It's a joint project between university and a firm, and the university gets the subsidy. The company doesn't get the subsidy, okay? Are we able to go that radical? In Switzerland it works. It has effects, all right? What is important here is, of course, the motivation of the firm. If the program involves subsidy for the firms, at least some part of the firms go for the subsidy, not for the cooperation, for anything else. Right? If you take the subsidy out of the equation, then we end up with firms that go for cooperation with the university, right? Is that what we want? Probably, actually, that's what we want, right? And here on a more funny note, this is live TV. It's a CNN broadcast that I saw by myself having breakfast in 2001. I almost choked. It's a silly mistake, okay? But wouldn't it be nice if this could be done not by silly, but by easily mistaking Czech Republic and Switzerland? Wouldn't that be nice? Not only in innovation policy, but beyond.